Okay, we're back. Perhaps you've had a chance to snag a copy of the outline, and we'll move along in accordance with that outline. Well, perhaps the first question you would ask, logically, is why I should be teaching this course. Well, I have been able to navigate the vagaries of the publishing pathways to get myself published, and I've learned an awful lot along the way on the industry itself and how one goes about becoming published. Perhaps I have an advantage in that I spent a good portion of my career in industry in sales and marketing, so I have been able to combine some of those marketing skills in particular with marketing oneself, which is an essential component these days in getting published. So you can also take a look at what I have accomplished in publishing by going to my author page, which I keep resident on Amazon.com under my name. And we'll talk more about author pages, websites, and Author Central on Amazon in a little bit. But again, if you want to check out what I've been up to, both in the traditional publishing and self-publishing world, my bio and all of my books and some of the background on my books are on that site on Amazon. So, the publishing industry today, it is obviously in a state of flux. But the good news is that the publishing industry is basically thriving. It is certainly true that there are far fewer publishing companies today than there were 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. And many of the secondary or smaller publishers have disappeared or consolidated with other publishers, especially in the last 10 years. But the publishing industry as a whole is doing quite well. In fact, if you were to look up some of the balance sheets of the biggest publishers, Hachette, Macmillan, Doubleday, the names I'm sure are familiar to you, you will find that they are doing pretty well. So it's an industry that is going to survive despite what many people think about the printed book. And that certainly was a big topic of discussion among the publishers. The largest publishing houses, I suspect they will settle into a number of anywhere between 10 and 15 in total. And those big publishers will certainly dominate the business over time. It remains to be seen whether Amazon is going to be a giant in the publishing business. There's certainly a giant in the book distribution business, but publishing not yet quite so much, and there's lots to watch there. But I'm here to tell you that the big publishing companies will be around, although there will be fewer of them. The smaller publishers, as I said before, have consolidated. Many, unfortunately, have gone away, just like many independent bookstores and even some large book chains. But it's a shakeout in the business that probably was long overdue, and here we are. I guess the bottom line is that there's still plenty of opportunity for authors in this marketplace. And there's plenty of opportunity to get published. You just have to figure out which is the right way to do it. I'm going to talk, as you see from the outline, really about a couple of different verticals in the publishing business. There is what I call the traditional publishing vertical, which consists of the publishers and companies I've just talked about, plus agents. Then there is the self-publishing vertical, which is an entirely different animal altogether, and one that many authors are considering very seriously today as a viable way to get published. And the third is kind of a hybrid where you might consider doing both. And that really is going to be dependent upon your, as I say, appetite for pain, which really evolves around your ability to market yourself and take responsibility for some of your own success. So let's talk about these three verticals, and let me begin by trying to help you figure out which is the right path for you. There are basically three. If you're interested in publishing a book or a piece of literature that focuses on your family, yourself, a series of specific events that are relative to your family or those with whom you interact, friends and associates, that really falls into a category of literature that we call memoir publishing. And what that really means is limited distribution for a small target audience. And it's a very viable way to create literature. But this sort of literature, as you might well imagine, is not intended for mass distribution, is not going to be subject to some of the challenges and rules of mass distribution, which is to say also some of the economics of that type of publishing. If you're really interested in producing what I call a memoir, you should pay more attention to the comments that we're going to be making on self-publishing a little bit later. The other two paths to publishing, whether it's traditional, self-published, or hybrid, evolve around whether or not you want to be rich or famous. Well, sometimes both, but if you want to be famous, then traditional publishing perhaps might be a better vehicle for you to consider. If you want to be rich, well, yes, there are authors who are published traditionally who are quite rich, but that universe of authors, the John Grishams, the James Pattersons, the Nelson DeMilles, are probably in the range of 200 to 300 pretty well-known names, and they are the top 1% of this business, and they garner probably 80 to 90% of the revenues. However, if you want to have literary fame, then traditional publishing is probably the better route for you to attempt. If you want to have monetary success, at least modest monetary success, and to have it happen as quickly as possible, then you might seriously consider the self-publishing route as the better route, at least to start with. You will have more control over your own destiny, and you will have the chance to make more money, at least up front, with a lot less of the traditional constraints that are put upon traditionally published authors. On the other hand, you're going to have to do a lot more marketing and help yourself out more than some traditional authors do. Coffee break. So let's talk about traditional publishers. Excuse me. By traditional publishers, I'm speaking of authors who get into the marketplace by approaching publishers through an agent. All of the remaining large publishing houses who do a tremendous amount of business are still working with agents. And although, just like with publishers, there are far fewer agents today than there were even 10 or 20 years ago, the agenting process is still very much a part of the business. And in order to get to some of these publishers, and get them to consider publishing your book, you're going to have to work with an agent. Most of the top publishing companies aren't even going to seriously look at manuscripts if they don't come through an agent. That is not to say you cannot send a manuscript or a book proposal to any publisher you might want to. I'm just suggesting to you that your chances of getting that manuscript reviewed are minuscule unless you have an agent who is willing to represent you to this class of publishers. Otherwise, your manuscript is going to go into the infamous slush pile, which is only growing and has grown to mountainous size in the publishing business over the past few years. Now, I also want to tell you, and this may be heretical to some, that probably just about everything you've heard prior to this class about how to shop a manuscript and get an agent, you should throw out the window. That is to say, we used to go about this very differently than what you need to do today to have a chance at being successful. I was taught, even 10 years ago, that the only way to begin this process was to send out the query letter. And I'm sure you've heard that term many times. You're sending out a query letter to an agent or a publisher to see if they might be interested in talking to you or possibly representing or publishing your work. And in the process of sending out a query letter, you picked up a copy of Writer's Digest or one of those publications who listed all of the available agents and publishers that are doing business these days, and how you can approach them, their submission requirements, their names, addresses, and so on and so forth. So you type up a query letter, you send it out, you wait 6 to 8 weeks, and inevitably you get a rejection letter and you start the process over again. Well, why wait the 6 to 8 weeks? This is a very fast-paced society. If you wait 6 to 8 weeks every time you submit a query, you're going to be 100 years old by the time you have your first manuscript under serious consideration. You really should try very hard to shorten that process by submitting your proposals to the right people, and as many of them as possible, as quickly as possible. So I'm going to give you some ideas on how to change your mindset on this process and become more successful. But again, we're talking about that traditional market, traditional publishing vertical that does require an agent. So how do you get an agent? That's what many people ask me right up front, and probably something that you're interested in. Well, there are several ways to go about the process, and I'm going to give you the 2 best ways that I know. The first is this: whether you realize it or not, you know an agent, or maybe perhaps better said, you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows an agent who might be right for you. This is the old 6 degrees of separation concept, and where you start to find an agent is with those people who know you best. These are your friends, your business associates, your acquaintances who know something about you, who can speak on your behalf. Trust me, there is somebody that you know who knows somebody who could be helpful to you in the publishing business, although you may not be directly connected to that person. So the first thing to do is send out that inquiry to your database, your email database, your friends, your business associates, dare I say relatives. That could be a path fraught with challenge, but anyway, those people you trust the most, and say to them, look, I'm embarking upon this quest. I would be very appreciative of you putting me in touch with someone who might be able to help me. Now, maybe somebody knows an agent, and that agent happens to be in children's book publishing, and you're in military nonfiction. Well, there's not a match there, but again, you're getting a personal introduction to someone, And an agent who is working in children's literature is bound to know other agents, or at least other companies that might be able to help you, and that's how you get involved with the process. Another avenue that you could take, which is certainly more proactive, and I highly recommend it. This is one of the best ways that I've ever heard about and run across to begin the agent finding process. Whatever it is that you are proposing, whatever it is that you have written, obviously it's within some sort of genre, whether it's biographies of jazz musicians, a book about a particular sports legend, a fictionalized book on murder mysteries. There are obviously people who are publishing books in that genre, whatever it happens to be. So here's what you do. Go to the library, and I mean physically go to the library, plus you can do some of this online, and you go look up perhaps a couple of dozen books that have been published in the last half dozen years that are very close in concept to the manuscript that you would like to bring forward. Again, using my quick example, if you want to write a biography of Louis Armstrong, then look up books that have been published about Louis Armstrong, because there have been several, and other musicians of his type, and gather those titles together. And then once you have those titles, you go to the back of the book and you look up something, a part of the book that hardly anybody ever reads, that portion of the book called Acknowledgments. And in the Acknowledgments section, every author who is worth his or her salt, and if they want to stay active in the writing business, is going to be thanking people for the help that they received in bringing this book to publication. And one of the people that authors generally always thank, they should thank, are their agents. So they will say, and thanks to my wonderful agent, so-and-so. So what do you have? You have a name. You have a name of an actual agent who has published a book that is in your genre. And if you do this through, as I suggested to you, a couple of dozen books, you'll come up with a very short list of agents who are actively working in the area of the publishing business where you would like to exist. So those are the agents that you start with, because they are publishing books and they are active. Go to the websites of those particular agents and look up their submission requirements, and voila, those are the people that you want to start with. So once you have the names of the agents and you have their submission requirements, now you move on to the all-important proposal, and I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute, but we're going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.